Happy Pride, everyone. My name is Crusilla Weiniger. I'm with the United Nations Foundation, and we're live here at the UN with Aaron Holtz from the UK mission to the United Nations. Aaron, so happy to have you here with us. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's my real pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
So tell us a little bit about what you've been up to lately. You do some work with the UN Human Rights Commission, and you're particularly focused on the rights for LGBTI communities. Talk us a little bit about what the Council is up to, what the UN is up to, and where your work is focused right now.
Sure. Well, I'm the gender advisor for the UK mission to the UN here in New York, and LGBT falls under my portfolio. We're doing a lot of really exciting work over the past years here at the UN and continuing to do more. I did just return from the Human Rights Council in Geneva for its June session, and there we had the first report ever of the new independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, Mr. Vitit Mundharbun from Thailand. Fantastic guy. He delivered his first report. His task is to look at cases of violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity around the world by doing country visits, writing reports, and communicating that back to member states for our further consideration. It was a real achievement to get his position agreed last year, and the UK was one of the countries really fighting in his corner to make sure that that mandate was adopted. So that was really exciting, coming from the Human Rights Council, hearing his first reports, his first indications of what he's going to work on over the next couple of years. Here in New York, we are members of the LGBT Core Group, which is a group of about 17 member states, along with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and our NGO partners, Outright Action International and Human Rights Watch. And it's an advocacy group that we've brought together, co-chaired by the Netherlands and Argentina. So it's a cross-regional group looking at ways to advocate for the rights of LGBT people and really the rights of everyone based on sexual orientation and gender identity in the context of the United Nations. So we hold events, we bring in speakers, and have strategic discussions as well about how we can best ensure that those rights are promoted here at the UN through our intergovernmental processes and through the work that the UN does around the world.
So why do you think LGBTI, and then particularly what's the UK's role in that?
I think LGBT rights are critical to promote at the UN because they're the pointy end of the human rights spear. When you think about the progress that we've made around human rights in the past century, we've been able to address the specific needs and concerns of many different marginalized groups. But the LGBTI community is really the last group that I can think of at the United Nations where some member states say, yeah, we kill them. Yeah, we don't recognize them. Yes, we do not support their rights. We see this as a new set of rights that we challenge as not being part of the internationally agreed system. So it's really important. It's kind of the final frontier in terms of promoting human rights, an inclusive approach to human rights for everyone. And so it's a challenge. It can be very difficult. The discussions we have here are very difficult. It touches on religious issues, cultural issues, West versus East, North versus South. Everything gets wrapped up into this. So there's a lot of charged discussions, but it's also a place where we can make some amazing progress. And I think we've seen that over the last couple of years. In terms of how the UK fits into that, we are a strong supporter for LGBT rights globally. The Foreign Office does a lot of good work around the world through our embassies in supporting local NGOs, civil society to do work on the ground, and to support individual LGBTI people in terms of consular issues. A number of our foreign offices will perform marriage ceremonies in countries where we're able to be able to support individual LGBTI people. And we have our own history as the UK. This year we're celebrating 50 years of partial decriminalization in England and Wales. So really within lifetimes of people that are living now, it was not the same situation as it is now in the UK. So we have
where LGBT rights are not recognized and in fact criminalized. What do you say when you're up against those criticisms of this is a construct imposed by the West or the North, or how do you navigate those waters and also be respectful and work within cultural expectations and the timelines of cultures to shift and move?
Yeah. That's a good question, and it's one of the biggest challenges. I don't think you can promote LGBTI rights or human rights in general at the point of a gun. You can't force countries to change the way that their laws are set up, or overnight to force cultures to adopt new patterns. At the same time, culture, religion can never be used as a reason for discrimination and for human rights violations, particularly by states who are duty bearers to individuals as rights holders. The political situation, the cultural situation, member states have a duty to respect human rights. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights starts, all people are born free and equal in dignity and human rights. That includes the LGBTI population. I think we also have to counter the narrative that these are new rights, these are special rights. True equality, that LGBTI people, human rights are protected, and that's freedom from discrimination, freedom from violence, the ability to live their lives in an authentic way. I think we also try to promote that it is not only the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do, to have an inclusive approach to development, to peace and security. It's all related together. On an individual level, you can often make more progress than speaking kind of government to government. And so here at the UN, as a diplomat, we do a lot of engagement, over coffees, over drinks, to try to understand each other a little bit better. And one angle that I always take is, my rights and your rights are interlinked. So if my rights as an LGBTI person can be violated, what's to say that tomorrow your rights will also be under attack? It can be a very slippery slope. And the human rights international framework that we've established through the Universal Declaration, through many other conventions, they're not very old. It was only a couple of generations ago where the world was at each other's throats, millions of people dying through horrific ways. That's what the UN was set up to do, was to kind of prevent that and to have discussions instead of resorting to violence. So being able to utilize this mechanism, start to understand each other better, we hope to make progress. And I think we do. We see it every year. Last year, we had 3 countries decriminalize same-sex activity, the Seychelles, Nauru, and Belize. And the sky hasn't fallen, and in fact, I'm sure that they can show that they've actually had a lot of benefits from taking a more inclusive approach to their LGBTI populations. So over time, the arc is in the right direction, and it's about continuing to have those conversations and putting pressure at a very high political level, which is what we try to do as the UK here at the UN.
What are you and your colleagues most worried about on these issues, and what are you most excited and encouraged by on LGBTI issues?
Well, I'll start with what I'm excited and encouraged about. The UN just recently agreed a new development agenda, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and I hope everyone knows about this agenda because it's quite groundbreaking. 17 goals, over 150 targets, really addressing almost every aspect of international cooperation, with a real goal of by 2030 achieving gender equality, eliminating extreme poverty, addressing sustainable consumption and production. This is a huge agenda. And it's all centered around the idea of leave no one behind. Our former Prime Minister, David Cameron, was very involved in the kind of elaboration of these goals at the beginning. And he stated very clearly, and the government continues to support this to this day, that no goal of this new agenda could be considered agreed and actually achieved unless it's achieved for every segment of the population. So a huge opportunity for the LGBTI population to engage with their governments as stakeholders in the development process, global development, to say, you need to count us, you need to address our concerns. So I'm really excited in that process, in the wider discussions that we have here at the UN, to make sure that LGBTI people have a voice in that discussion and use that as an opportunity to engage with stakeholders that they normally maybe wouldn't get an airing. So there's green shoots, in terms of opportunities. What's difficult? Pain and suffering going around in the world, and sometimes I think you can kind of lose a sense of what we're after because we're dealing with different crises that continue to go on. So I think just maintaining a consistent push for human rights, not losing that focus as we're dealing with so many other things that were happening here at the UN, including the UK, obviously with our Brexit negotiations launching, to make sure that we're continuing to promote that human rights-based approach, which we have a full next year, thinking about the other political issues that are happening around the world and just seeing how it all shakes out. It's a kind of a nervous time at the UN, but I have a lot of hope, particularly on this agenda.
Are there particular mechanisms that you are helping to put in place, or the Human Rights Commission is putting in place, to ensure that LGBTI people are not left behind on the Sustainable Development Goals?
So governments are the main holders of this agenda, so they're going to have to be accountable. So over the next couple of years, we'll see a lot of different processes where governments will come and explain how they've been delivering on this agenda. Great opportunity to be able for other governments in a peer-to-peer review process to be able to say, well, what are you doing for your LGBT population? Have you addressed? Have you removed punitive laws? Have you put in place more empowering laws? Where are you spending your money? These questions can be asked, and they'll need to be. The UN system is also doing as much work as possible to ensure that the massive amount of stakeholders who participated in this development agenda and developing it stay engaged as actors. So looking to different parts of the UN system, particularly the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, to ensure that different stakeholder groups get their voice heard in the process, including LGBTI people. And then, of course, as I said, this new independent expert is really groundbreaking. His reports, the work that he will do over the next few years, can lay the groundwork for future action at the Human Rights Council in different parts of the UN system. In addition, we're doing stuff outside of the UN system. So the Equal Rights Coalition is something that was just created about a year and a half ago in Uruguay. Uruguay and Netherlands started the co-chairmanship of that. I believe Canada has also thrown their hat in the ring as co-chairs. There's 35 countries. We're a founding member as well as the UK. And that's looking at international cooperation outside of the UN context, but making sure that we're linking together all of our work and that we're seeing the added value of the different initiatives that are being undertaken. So I think that kind of work in the Equal Rights Coalition, with our work in the LGBT core group, to give some political pressure and some advocacy, with the Sustainable Development Agenda and the inputs from civil society there, it paints quite a nice tapestry and a lot of different entry points to make sure that LGBTI voices are heard at the UN.
You have the most fascinating job.
It's interesting. It's still a job. I'd rather be fishing, but or doing something
But
else.
I'm sure actually there are people who are watching today who want to know a bit more about how you got to this position and how what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Well, you might be able to tell from my accent, I'm American. The British Foreign Office is very innovative in hiring non-nationals to do diplomatic work. So I've been lucky enough to work for the UK mission to the UN for almost 10 years now. I should probably find another job, but it's so interesting, and you get to do so much good work and see some progress. So it's quite addictive. How I got into the work, I studied international relations in school. I did an internship with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees here in New York, and that kind of opened the door to coming to work for the British government. What I do on a day-to-day basis, like I said, it's a lot of coffee. A lot of coffee and drinks and meals, meeting my colleagues. One of my favorite professors from university used to say, if you're studying international relations, I'm teaching you how to have relations with international people. And that's kind of what we do. It's about building rapport. It's about seeing each other's point of view and figuring out the best way to convince each other. And it's very interesting how different member states engage here at the UN because, some have very clear instructions from the top of their governments on different issues. Some have low capacity, and it's really up to the expert here to decide which way their government is going to go on certain issues. So there's a lot of different ways to influence. So that's what we're always trying to do. Not in a nefarious way, in a constructive way, but figuring out the best ways to influence to achieve British objectives, which quite often are broader international human rights objectives. So I do a lot of talking, I do a lot of reading. There's a lot of events that happen here, side events with experts, with civil society participants that we can kind of learn from each other. So it's kind of like a long conversation. If you don't know what the UN is, it's just kind of a big, long conversation that's happening. And, a lot of people say to the UN, oh, it's just a talk shop. Well, even if it was just a talk shop, there's value there because it's a place where we can all meet all from around the world and get something off of our chest or start a new initiative and see who else is interested in and drive that forward. And that's in addition to all of the wonderful things that the UN does in terms of development work, in terms of protecting and promoting human rights. So, it's kind of a new thing every day. but a constant kind of push for how can we influence better, how can we achieve our objectives in a way that makes it's win-win for everybody.
Well, and I think in any long conversation, there's also incredible opportunities for listening, and I certainly observe an enormous amount of listening going on at the UN as well.
Yeah, if you're just talking and not listening, then you're really missing most of what can be done here. And there's a lot of people that know how to talk here, and very few who know how to listen. So, yeah, that's a good skill to have for sure.
So my final question to you is really give us some marching orders. What can we as ordinary citizens, both as members of the LGBTI community and as allies, how can we get involved in this movement, and how can we support the work of the UN in ending discrimination for these vulnerable communities?
Well, the UN is the people's house. So I think the first thing is to understand that this place was built for us to achieve a better world. So get involved. Sign up to the different campaigns. Great example, Young Women has a He for She campaign, which is about getting men involved in the discussion for gender equality. All of this stuff is related. So if you're interested in promoting LGBT rights, it doesn't have to be just through the LGBT rubric. You can look at broader gender equality. You can look at the rights of indigenous people, the rights of disabled people, the rights of different minority groups, linking those causes together in a leave no one behind approach, I think is really, really important. And on a personal level, we've seen people change their minds when they know other people. So if you know an LGBT person, go give them a hug. Go introduce them to your friends or family who are maybe not convinced about this issue. And also see it, like I said at the beginning, that our human rights are interlinked. So perfect example, the special rapporteur that I mentioned. It's not an LGBT rapporteur. He's a special rapporteur on violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. All of us have that. Straight, gay, everything in between. We all have a sexual orientation. We all have a gender identity. None of us should be discriminated based on that fact. And I think keeping in mind, we don't have time for discrimination. The problems that are facing the world nowadays are massive. Climate change, massive migration flows, addressing global poverty. These things take everybody on. We need everybody on board to actually achieve something. So see the value in empowering other people. Even if you don't agree, don't understand the sexual orientation thing, don't really agree with it for whatever reasons that you have, and I don't know what those would be, but whatever they are, think about, well, what's in it for me? An empowered fellow citizen can deliver results that are going to benefit me in the long term. So it is a smart thing to do to promote equality. And so I think keeping some of those in mind maybe opens the ideas for different ways to get involved. And certainly getting involved with the UN Free and Equal campaign would be a great starting point. It's run by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. It produces some fantastic material to show actually the value of equality. And there's a lot of ways to get involved that way.
Erin, thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you've had a happy Pride Month.
It's been great. It's been great. I was marching with the best of them. We had a UK float at Pride this year. We've marched in the New York Pride for the last couple of years. So you can go on our mission webpage and Twitter feed to see some great photos from our Pride experience last weekend. It was pretty awesome.
Well, from all at the UN Foundation, thank you again. It's been our pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.